Imagine if every thought you had shaped the way you saw the world and determined what you attracted into your life. The truth is, your mind finds exactly what you feed it. If you nourish it with clarity, focus, and purpose, you create a life of peace and fulfillment. But if you fill it with doubt, fear, and negativity, that is what you will encounter everywhere you go. As the Buddha said, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Your thoughts are not just passing moments, they are seeds. And like any seed, they grow into whatever they are nurtured to become. Imagine planting a garden. If you plant seeds of kindness, patience, and wisdom, your life will bloom with these qualities. But if you plant seeds of anger, jealousy, and fear, your world will become filled with suffering, anxiety, and struggle. This is why mindfulness is so crucial. It is the awareness of what you are planting in your own mind. In Buddhism, the power of thought is a central teaching. What you focus on expands. What you dwell on shapes your reality. This is why monks dedicate their lives to mindfulness, to cultivate thoughts that bring peace rather than turmoil. Every thought that takes root in your mind is a building block for your life. When you consciously choose thoughts of gratitude, resilience, and love, your inner and outer world begins to reflect them. This is why the Buddha stressed right thought as a pillar of the Noble Eightfold Path. But the world around you is constantly competing for your attention. Every conversation, every piece of information you consume, every environment you step into, these things shape your mind, often without you even realizing it. If you are not careful, you absorb negativity without questioning it. You let gossip, conflict, and distractions seep into your consciousness, clouding your inner peace. Buddhism teaches that guarding the sense doors, your eyes, ears, and mind, is essential. What you see, what you listen to, and the words you allow into your heart all play a role in shaping your mind. If you constantly expose yourself to chaos, your mind will reflect chaos. But if you surround yourself with wisdom, kindness, and stillness, your mind will become a place of refuge. Imagine your mind as a still pond. Every thought, every piece of information, every conversation is a stone thrown into it. Some create gentle ripples, others create waves. The more mindful you are about what enters your consciousness, the calmer your waters remain. This is why monks retreat into nature, why spiritual seekers meditate in silence, why those who seek wisdom are careful about who they allow into their lives. Take a moment to reflect. What have you been feeding your mind lately? Are you nourishing it with wisdom, or are you allowing negativity to take root? When was the last time you sat in silence, free from distractions, simply observing your own thoughts? If you wish to create peace in your life, you must first create peace in your mind. And peace begins with what you allow yourself to consume. Most people go through life on autopilot, reacting without awareness, moving through their days without questioning their thoughts. Buddhism teaches that mindless reactivity is one of the greatest obstacles to inner peace. Have you ever found yourself reacting in anger, only to regret it later? Have you ever spoken words in frustration that you wished you could take back? These moments happen when we operate unconsciously, allowing our old patterns to dictate our actions. But here is the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of them. And the moment you realize this, you take back control. When you find yourself reacting, pause. Observe the thought behind the reaction. Is it fear? Is it frustration? Is it an old wound resurfacing? Acknowledge it without judgment, and then consciously choose how you will respond. Each time you do this, you reclaim a piece of your power. Over time, you begin to respond to life rather than react to it. Instead of being pulled into conflict, you become the calm in the storm. Instead of feeding anger, you choose understanding. Instead of being controlled by your emotions, you guide them. Challenges will come. This is inevitable. Buddhism teaches that suffering is a natural part of life. But suffering is also a teacher. In every hardship, there is an opportunity for growth. The question is not, why is this happening to me? But what is this here to teach me? Consider the way monks train their minds. They do not avoid discomfort, they embrace it. They see every challenge as a way to cultivate patience, resilience, and non-attachment. The more you resist life's difficulties, the more they control you. But when you accept them with an open heart, you free yourself from suffering. Each challenge you face is a lesson in disguise. Ask yourself, what strength is this experience trying to cultivate in me? When you shift your mindset from resistance to learning, suffering transforms into wisdom. Every hardship becomes a stepping stone. Every setback becomes a source of inner strength. There is a secret to peace that few understand. Gratitude is the key to happiness. It is not found in achieving more, in gaining more, in proving more. It is found in recognizing what you already have. The Buddha taught that the mind is often restless, always searching for something more. We believe that happiness is just beyond our reach, that we will feel fulfilled once we achieve the next goal, once we acquire the next possession, once we reach the next milestone. But gratitude stops this endless chase. It turns your focus from what is missing to what is already present. And in that shift, you realize that contentment is not something you find. It is something you choose. Start small. Every morning, take a moment to acknowledge something you are grateful for. It could be the warmth of the sun, the comfort of a quiet moment, the kindness of a stranger. These small moments of gratitude build upon each other, reshaping your mind to focus on abundance rather than lack. Even in hardship, there is something to be grateful for. If you are facing challenges, be grateful for the strength they are cultivating in you. If you are experiencing loss, be grateful for the love you once had. If you are struggling, be grateful for the lessons life is teaching you. Gratitude does not mean ignoring pain. It means seeing beyond it. Each moment is an opportunity. Each thought is a choice. What you feed your mind will shape the life you create. So choose wisely. They are not asking for clarity. They are asking for compliance. They want you to bend, to explain, to prove yourself, not because they need answers, but because they want to keep you within the boundaries that make them comfortable. And once you see this, once you realize that explaining yourself has never been about helping others understand, but about keeping you in place, you will stop. You will walk away from the need to be understood. You will release the need to be accepted. You will step fully into the knowing that your existence is not up for debate. But this path is not easy. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the world will push back. Some will call you arrogant. Some will call you distant. Some will accuse you of changing, of not caring, of being selfish. Let them. Their discomfort is not your problem to solve. Their misunderstanding is not your burden to carry. Because here is the deeper truth. When you stop explaining yourself, you force others to confront their own insecurities. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them their own doubts, their own fears, their own need for validation. And most people cannot handle that. They would rather pull you back into the cycle than face the reality that they too are capable of living without explanation. But you must not lower yourself for their comfort. You must not shrink to fit into the spaces you have outgrown. You must not soften your voice to make others feel secure in their own limitations. The eagle does not descend to explain its flight to the creatures of the earth. The river does not pause its course to justify why it flows. The sun does not dim its light because some find it too bright. And you do not need to explain why you are no longer the person you used to be. There is a story of a monk who spent years in solitude, meditating in the mountains. When he finally returned to the village, people bombarded him with questions. What did you learn? Why did you leave? Why did you come back? But the monk did not answer. He simply smiled, walking past them without a word. Some were frustrated, some were confused. But the ones who truly understood, they did not ask. They simply walked with him, knowing that the greatest truths need no explanation. You must move through life the same way. Let them question, let them assume, let them misunderstand. It is not your job to correct them. It is not your responsibility to make them comfortable with your growth. Your only task is to keep moving forward, to keep expanding, to keep becoming the version of yourself that no longer asks for permission to exist. But understand this, when you stop explaining, you will lose people. Some will fall away, some will resent you, some will try to pull you back into old patterns, hoping to make you doubt yourself. Do not engage, let them go. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with the quiet understanding that their chapter in your life has ended. Because the right ones, They will not ask you to explain. They will not demand that you prove yourself. They will not make you feel as if you must justify your own existence. They will simply recognize you. They will see you without words, without effort, without expectation. And those are the only ones who were ever meant to walk with you. So ask yourself, who are you still explaining yourself to? And why? What would happen if right now you decided that no explanation was necessary? That you were allowed to exist, to grow, to move forward without justifying it to anyone? The answer is simple. You would be free. And once you taste that freedom, once you step into the lightness of living without the weight of explanation, you will wonder why you ever sought approval in the first place. There is no need to explain, no need to convince, no need to wait. You are already enough. You always have been. And that is all the explanation the world will ever need. There is a point in life when you must stop explaining yourself, not because you do not care, but because you finally understand that those who truly see you do not need an explanation. The need to justify, to defend, to prove yourself to those who refuse to understand you is nothing more than an invisible leash keeping you bound to a life of exhaustion. And if you are not careful, you will wake up one day and realize that you have spent more time trying to be understood than actually living. The greatest power you will ever hold is the ability to move forward without needing to be seen, without needing to be validated, without needing permission to exist in the fullness of who you are. The strongest people in history were not the ones who begged for understanding. They were the ones who simply became so undeniable that no explanation was ever necessary. Imagine a warrior standing in the middle of a battlefield. The air is thick with tension. Enemies surround them, waiting, watching, hoping for a sign of weakness, a moment of hesitation. But the warrior does not explain why they are there. They do not ask their enemies to understand them. They do not waste their energy justifying their existence. They simply stand, calm, steady, unshaken. That is the essence of true strength. But most people do not live like this. They feel the need to explain every move they make. They justify their choices, their beliefs, their existence to people who were never meant to understand them. They shrink themselves. They soften their voices. They make themselves smaller in the hopes that they will finally be accepted. But the truth is, the ones who demand explanations are often the ones who have already made up their minds. No matter how much you explain, no matter how much you justify, they will never see you as you are. And the ones who truly see you, they have never needed an explanation in the first place. There is an old parable of a traveler who carried a lantern through the night. Along the way, people stopped him, demanding to know why he carried the light when the stars were already shining. Some mocked him. Some accused him of arrogance. But the traveler did not respond. He simply kept walking. And the ones who truly needed the light, they followed without question, without hesitation, without needing an explanation. This is how you must live. You do not owe the world an explanation for why you are walking your path. You do not need to justify why you have changed, why you no longer fit into the mold that others placed you in, why you refuse to remain where you no longer belong. The ones who are meant to walk with you will recognize your path without needing a single word. And the ones who do not, they were never meant to walk with you in the first place. But this is not easy. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the world will resist. People will demand answers. They will try to pull you back into old conversations, old versions of yourself, old patterns that no longer serve you. They will try to provoke a reaction, to make you question yourself, to force you to defend who you have become. But this is the test. Will you stand firm in your knowing, or will you waste your breath trying to be understood by those who will never see you? Most people fall into the trap of believing that if they just explain enough, if they just find the right words, they will finally be accepted. But the truth is, acceptance does not come from others. It comes from within. The day you stop needing external validation is the day you step into true power. Imagine a river flowing through the mountains. It does not explain why it moves. It does not justify the path it takes. It simply flows, carving its way forward, shaping the world around it without hesitation, without apology. Some will admire it. Some will fear it. Some will try to stop it, but none of it matters. The river continues. You must be like the river, but be prepared. When you stop explaining yourself, you will lose people. Some will fall away because they no longer recognize you. Some will resent your growth because it forces them to confront their own stagnation. Some will try to pull you back because your presence makes them uncomfortable. Let them go, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet understanding that their chapter in your life has ended. Because the ones who are meant to stay, they will not need an explanation. They will see you. They will feel your energy. They will recognize your strength without needing to be told. There is a lesson that most never learn. The most powerful people do not argue. They do not defend. They do not seek validation. They simply exist in such an unshakable way that their presence alone demands respect. The ones who talk the loudest, who explain the most, who seek the most approval, are often the ones who feel the least secure. But the ones who stand in silence, unwavering, untouchable, those are the ones who truly hold power. Look at your own life. How much energy have you spent trying to be understood? How many moments have been lost explaining yourself to people who were never meant to see you? How much of your time has been wasted defending choices that needed no defense? And now ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped? If you simply moved forward without hesitation, without justification, without the need to be validated? What if instead of explaining yourself, you let your actions speak? What if instead of defending your choices, you embodied them so fully that no explanation was ever necessary? The answer is simple. You would be free, and that freedom is worth more than every explanation you have ever given. So let them misunderstand you. Let them question you. Let them form their own opinions. It is not your job to correct them. It is not your responsibility to make them see. Your only task is to rise beyond them, to step into your power, to become so undeniable that no words are needed. Because the truth is, you were never meant to explain yourself. You were meant to become. And once you embrace that, once you stop seeking validation and start walking your path without hesitation, you will realize something extraordinary. You were never behind. You were never lost. You were never waiting for permission. You were always free. You simply needed to stop explaining yourself to step into it. There is a power in silence that most people will never understand. In a world that thrives on noise, that demands explanations, that seeks validation in every interaction, choosing not to explain yourself is an act of rebellion. It is the ultimate declaration of self-mastery. It is a signal to the world that you are no longer bound by its expectations, that you no longer need approval to exist, that you have stepped into a space where you know who you are, and that is enough. Most people live their lives in reaction mode. They react to opinions, to judgments, to misunderstandings. They spend their days trying to clarify, to justify, to ensure that no one misinterprets their actions. And yet, in all their explaining, they never truly find peace. Because the truth is, those who wish to misunderstand you will do so no matter how much you explain. Think of a river. It flows effortlessly, carving through mountains, shaping landscapes, moving with an undeniable force. The river does not explain its path. It does not ask for permission to change direction. It simply moves, adjusting, adapting, finding its way without hesitation. And yet it is powerful enough to shape the very earth beneath it. You must learn to move like this, but the world will resist. The moment you stop explaining yourself, people will notice. Some will call you distant. Others will say you have changed. They will demand answers, trying to pull you back into the version of yourself that they were comfortable with. Let them. Their discomfort is not your problem. Because here is the truth. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop seeking validation, you step into a kind of power that cannot be touched by outside forces. You become unpredictable, unshakable, untamed. And that makes people uneasy. Imagine standing in the center of a crowded room. Everywhere around you, people are talking, debating, demanding attention, and yet you stand in complete silence, unbothered, unmoved. Do you see what happens? The noise around you becomes irrelevant. The people who once expected you to react are left unsettled because they no longer have control over your energy. This is the kind of presence that commands respect, not through words but through certainty. There is a story of a warrior who was insulted by a man in the village. The man shouted, mocked, and tried to provoke a reaction. But the warrior simply stood there, calm, still, looking the man in the eyes without a word. The man grew frustrated. "Why don't you defend yourself?" he demanded. The warrior finally spoke. "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, who does it belong to?" The man hesitated. "To the one who gave it." The warrior nodded. "Then why would I accept your anger?" This is the mindset of those who cannot be broken. They do not engage in battles that are beneath them. They do not waste energy on those who seek to drain them. They understand that their peace is worth more than the illusion of winning an argument. But here is where most people struggle. They believe that if they stop explaining, they will lose relationships. They will be misunderstood. They will be seen as cold or distant. And some people will misunderstand. Some people will walk away. Some will create their own stories about you. Let them. Because the truth is, the ones who matter, the ones who truly see you, do not need an explanation. They recognize your energy, your presence, your truth, without needing it to be spoken. And those who demand an explanation, they were never truly listening in the first place. There is an old Zen saying, "The moon does not fight with the clouds that try to cover it. The moon simply continues shining, knowing that the clouds will pass." This is the way you must live. Do not argue with those who refuse to see your light. Do not lower yourself to convince those who are determined to misunderstand. Do not waste your energy trying to prove what is already evident in your existence. The strongest presence is not the one that speaks the loudest, but the one that does not need to speak at all. But when you stop explaining, you will be tested. People will challenge your silence, mistaking it for weakness. They will try to push you, provoke you, drag you back into the noise. This is the moment where you must remain firm. Do not let them pull you into their storm. Stand tall and make them question why they need your reaction so badly. There is a reason that the most powerful beings in history were often the most silent. The enlightened, the wise, the unshakable. They did not argue. They did not fight for approval. They did not seek validation. They simply were. And in their presence, the world had no choice but to adjust. Look at your own life. How many times have you explained yourself to people who never truly listen? How many times have you defended yourself against accusations that did not deserve your energy? How many hours, days, even years have you wasted trying to make others see you when the only person who ever truly needed to see you was you? What would happen if, starting today, you simply stopped? If you stopped explaining, stopped justifying, stopped handing your power away to those who do not deserve it? If you moved through life like the river, like the fire, like the mountain, unshaken, unstoppable, undeniable? The world does not need another person who is begging to be understood. The world needs those who have become so aligned with their truth that understanding is no longer required. So stand tall. Let them misunderstand you. Let them question. Let them doubt. It is not your burden to correct them. It is not your job to seek their approval. It is not your responsibility to be understood. Your only task is to be. And when you finally embrace that, you will experience something most never do: true, unshakable freedom. There comes a time when you must decide if you will keep carrying the weight of others' opinions or if you will finally let them go. If you will continue explaining yourself to those who have already decided not to listen, or if you will walk forward, free from the need to be understood. The hardest lesson in life is realizing that not everyone is meant to see you clearly. Some are too consumed by their own limitations, too blinded by their own fears, too invested in keeping you small because your growth threatens their comfort. And no amount of explaining will change that. You were not born to justify yourself. You were not placed on this earth to fit into the expectations of those who cannot even understand themselves. You were not meant to shrink your spirit into something more digestible just so others can be comfortable with your presence. The sun does not ask permission to shine. The ocean does not explain its depth. The mountain does not justify its height. And yet people demand that you explain why you have chosen to rise. But ask yourself this: why should you? Most people spend their lives trapped in an invisible prison, one built from the fear of being misunderstood. They hesitate before speaking their truth. They second-guess their every decision. They hold back their dreams, their voices, their very existence, waiting for someone to tell them that it's okay to be who they already are. But who are they waiting for? Who has the authority to grant them permission to live fully? The answer is no one. No one but themselves. Imagine a bird that has spent its entire life in a cage. Even though the door was always open, it watches others fly. It feels the wind calling to its wings, but it remains where it is, afraid of the unknown, afraid of what it has never experienced, afraid of stepping into its own freedom. One day, another bird lands near the cage and asks, "Why do you stay?" The caged bird replies, "Because this is all I have ever known." The other bird simply nods and says, "Then you have never truly lived." How many people live this way? How many wake up every day, carrying the weight of opinions that do not serve them, repeating patterns that do not fulfill them, explaining themselves to people who will never understand them? And for what? Has explaining yourself ever made you feel free? Has justifying your existence ever brought you peace? Or has it only drained you, left you questioning yourself, kept you bound to a version of yourself that no longer exists? Freedom is not given, it is claimed. But claiming your freedom requires one thing: the courage to stop explaining. It means letting go of the need to be understood. It means accepting that some people will never see you clearly, and that is not your problem to fix. It means walking away from the conversations that drain you, the battles that were never yours to fight, the people who only hear what they want to hear. There is an old parable of a wise sage who lived on the edge of a great mountain. Many sought his guidance, traveling from distant lands to ask him questions. Some came with open hearts, eager to learn. Others came with skepticism, determined to prove him wrong. One day, a man approached and said, "If you are so wise, explain to me the meaning of life." The sage simply smiled and pointed toward the sky. The man scoffed, "That is not an answer." The sage only nodded and said, "For those who seek to understand, no words are necessary. For those who seek to argue, no words will ever be enough." This is the lesson. The ones who are meant to understand you will see you without needing an explanation. And the ones who demand one, they were never listening in the first place. But the moment you stop explaining, the world will push back. It will call you arrogant, selfish, distant. It will try to guilt you into shrinking, to manipulate you into defending your choices, to pull you back into the cycle of justification. Do not fall for it. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their opinions are not your concern. Because here is the truth. People do not want you to stop explaining for your sake. They want you to keep explaining for theirs. When you stop seeking validation, they are forced to confront their own insecurities. When you walk forward without hesitation, they are forced to question why they are still standing still. When you no longer need their approval, they are forced to face the reality that they have spent their lives chasing something that was never necessary to begin with. And that is why the ones who rise, the ones who truly step into their power, do so in silence. They do not ask the world for permission. They do not waste their energy convincing others of their worth. They do not look back at the ones who refuse to see them. They simply move. Think of the river that carves its way through stone. It does not argue with the rocks in its path. It does not stop to explain why it must flow. It moves forward, relentless, unstoppable, shaping the world without a single word. You must move like this. But here's the challenge. When you stop explaining, some people will leave. They will not know how to be in your presence without the version of you that once sought their approval. Let them go, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the understanding that their role in your journey has ended. Because the ones who are meant to walk with you will not ask for an explanation. They will not demand that you shrink. They will not fear your growth. They will recognize you without words, and they will move beside you, not because you convinced them, but because they already knew. So ask yourself, what are you still explaining? Who are you still trying to convince? And why? What would happen if right now you decided that no explanation was necessary? The answer is simple. You would be free. And once you step into that freedom, once you let go of the weight of unnecessary explanations, you will never return to the smallness of seeking permission to exist. Because the truth is, you were never meant to explain yourself. You were meant to become so undeniable that no explanation is needed. There is a moment in life when you must decide whether you will live bound by the expectations of others or whether you will free yourself from the weight of needing to be understood. Most people never make this choice consciously. They wake up each day and follow the invisible script that was written for them, by their upbringing, by society, by the fear of disappointing those around them. They live explaining themselves at every turn, seeking validation from people who have no right to dictate the course of their lives. And in doing so, they give away the one thing that was always theirs, their power. But what if you stopped? What if you let go of the need to explain yourself? What if instead of bending to fit into the mold that others created for you, you allowed yourself to exist fully, unapologetically, without permission? Most people fear this level of freedom because it comes with a price. When you stop explaining, people will misunderstand you. When you stop justifying, people will assume the worst. When you stop seeking approval, some will call you selfish, others will call you arrogant, and some will even try to shame you back into submission. But the ones who walk through this fire, the ones who stand firm in their truth despite the resistance, they are the ones who discover what true power feels like. Imagine a river carving its way through the earth. It does not stop to explain why it flows. It does not pause to seek permission from the rocks in its path. It does not concern itself with whether others understand its journey. It simply moves effortlessly because that is its nature. And in its movement, it shapes the very landscape around it. You must become like the river. But understand this: the moment you stop explaining yourself, you will be tested. The world does not easily let go of those it once controlled. People will demand answers. They will question your choices. They will try to make you feel guilty for not bending to their expectations. And in those moments, you must remember, their discomfort is not your responsibility. Most people live their entire lives afraid of disappointing others. They shape their decisions based on what will be accepted, what will be praised, what will keep them in good standing with those around them. But tell me this: how many of those people will be standing with you at the end of your life? How many of them will carry the weight of your regrets? How many of them will truly understand the battles you have fought, the struggles you have endured, the depth of your soul? The answer is none. And yet, you let their opinions dictate your life. You let their judgments shape your decisions. You let their misunderstandings keep you small. But the moment you realize that you owe no one an explanation for the path you choose, you will feel something most people never do: lightness. There is a famous Zen story of a man carrying a heavy load of firewood on his back. He has been carrying it for so long that he has forgotten what it feels like to walk without it. One day he comes across a wise master who simply says, "Drop it." And so the man lets go. Instantly, he feels relief. The burden that had weighed him down for years was gone in an instant. He looks at the master and says, "Now what?" The master smiles and replies, "Now walk." This is the secret. You have been carrying the weight of explanations, justifications, and expectations for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to simply be. You have been living under the illusion that you must prove yourself to be worthy, that you must earn the right to be at peace, that you must convince others before you can step into your own power. But the truth is, the only permission you ever needed was your own. Think of the people you admire, the ones who move through life with a presence that cannot be ignored. Do they explain themselves? Do they justify every decision? Do they seek approval before they take action? Number, they move, they create, they become. And in doing so, they command a level of respect that no explanation could ever earn. But most people will never reach this level of freedom because they are too afraid of being misunderstood. They believe that if they do not explain, they will lose the people around them. And they are right. Some will leave. Some will question. Some will resent your growth. But let them, because the ones who are meant to walk with you will not need an explanation. They will feel your energy. They will recognize your presence. They will understand without words. And the ones who do not, they were never meant to be part of your path in the first place. There is a quiet kind of power in moving forward without hesitation. A fire does not pause to explain why it burns. A mountain does not justify its height. A lion does not seek approval before it roars. And yet people feel their presence. They recognize their power. They understand without needing to be told. You must move through life in the same way. Because here is the greatest truth of all. Your energy is your explanation. The way you carry yourself, the way you move, the way you exist in this world will tell those who are meant to understand everything they need to know. And the ones who demand more, the ones who need you to justify your choices, the ones who cannot accept you as you are, they do not deserve access to you. So let go. Let go of the need to explain. Let go of the belief that you must be understood. Let go of the weight of living for others. Step into the lightness of simply being and watch as the world adjusts to you. Not because you asked it to, not because you explained yourself into acceptance, but because you became undeniable. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you will realize something most people never do. You simply needed to stop seeking permission to step into it. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself. A kind of freedom that is unfamiliar at first, almost unsettling. You have spent your whole life being taught that you must be understood, that your choices must be justified, that your actions must be accepted by others before they can be real. And yet there comes a day when you realize that none of this is true, that all of the explaining, all of the defending, all of the justifying, it was never for you. It was for them, for their comfort, for their ability to categorize you into something that makes sense to them. But you were not born to fit into their understanding. You were born to be beyond it. Imagine a bird trying to explain to a fish what it means to fly. No matter how eloquent its words, no matter how detailed its descriptions, the fish will never fully understand. It cannot. It has never felt the wind beneath its wings, never soared above the clouds, never experienced the sky. And so the bird has a choice. It can waste its time explaining, trying to convince the fish of something it will never grasp, or it can simply spread its wings and fly. This is the choice you face every day. You can spend your time trying to make others understand your path, or you can walk it. You can explain why you have changed, or you can be the change. You can defend your evolution, or you can evolve without waiting for approval. The strongest people in history were never the ones who asked for permission. They were not the ones who stopped at every turn to explain why they were doing what they were doing. They did not waste their breath arguing with those who refused to see. They became, without apology, without hesitation, without waiting for the world to catch up. And in doing so, they forced the world to adjust to them rather than the other way around. But most people are afraid of this. They are afraid of being misunderstood. They are afraid of walking alone. They are afraid of what will happen if they step outside of the version of themselves that others have come to expect. And so, they stay small. They hold back. They explain themselves into exhaustion, hoping that if they say the right words, if they phrase it just right, if they justify enough, they will finally be accepted. But the truth is, those who require an explanation will never truly understand. And those who truly understand will never require an explanation. Think of a river carving through a mountain. It does not ask the rocks for permission to flow. It does not stop to explain why it moves in the direction that it does. It does not justify its persistence, its depth, its force. It simply moves forward, and in doing so, it reshapes the very landscape around it. This is how you must move, without hesitation, without waiting for approval, without asking for permission. But be prepared. When you stop explaining, when you stop seeking validation, when you begin to walk your own path without apology, the world will push back. People will demand answers. They will accuse you of arrogance. They will say you have changed. They will try to make you feel guilty for outgrowing the space they were comfortable keeping you in. Let them. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. Their inability to understand is not your responsibility to fix. Their confusion about your path is not your obligation to clarify. Because here is the secret. Your existence is not a debate. You do not owe the world an explanation for why you have chosen to heal, to grow, to evolve. You do not owe anyone a justification for why you are no longer willing to stay in places that diminish you. You do not have to prove that you deserve the life you are creating for yourself. You simply are. And those who are meant to walk with you will see that. They will feel it. They will recognize your energy, your strength, your certainty, not because you explained it to them, but because they have done the work to understand it themselves. The ones who do not, they were never meant to walk this path with you. There is a parable of a man who spent years planting trees in a barren desert. The villagers laughed at him. They told him he was wasting his time, that nothing would ever grow in such dry, lifeless soil. They demanded that he explain himself, that he justify why he was putting in so much effort for something they could not yet see. But the man did not argue. He did not waste his energy defending himself. He simply kept planting. Years passed and the trees began to grow. The land transformed. The desert that was once lifeless became a thriving oasis. And the same people who had laughed, who had doubted, who had demanded explanations, now they stood in awe. This is how you must live. Let them laugh, let them doubt, let them demand that you explain yourself. And while they do, keep planting, keep growing, keep becoming. Because the truth is, those who demand an explanation are often the ones who lack the vision to see what is unfolding before them. They are looking at the barren land, unaware of the roots already taking hold beneath the surface. They see only what is, not what is becoming. But you do not owe them a glimpse into what you are building. You do not have to prove that the seeds you are planting will grow. You do not have to pause your own evolution just to make others comfortable with it. Because one day when the trees stand tall, when the land is unrecognizable from what it once was, when the transformation is undeniable, there will be nothing left to explain. And in that moment, you will realize something powerful. You never needed them to understand. You only needed to keep going. So stop explaining, stop justifying, stop waiting for approval that will never come. You do not need to be understood. You only need to be. They are not asking for clarity, they are asking for compliance. They want you to bend, to explain, to prove yourself, not because they need answers, but because they want to keep you within the boundaries that make them comfortable. And once you see this, once you realize that explaining yourself has never been about helping others understand, but about keeping you in place, you will stop. You will walk away from the need to be understood. You will release the need to be accepted. You will step fully into the knowing that your existence is not up for debate. But this path is not easy. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the world will push back. Some will call you arrogant. Some will call you distant. Some will accuse you of changing, of not caring, of being selfish. Let them. Their discomfort is not your problem to solve. Their misunderstanding is not your burden to carry. Because here is the deeper truth. When you stop explaining yourself, you force others to confront their own insecurities. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them their own doubts, their own fears, their own need for validation. And most people cannot handle that. They would rather pull you back into the cycle than face the reality that they too are capable of living without explanation. But you must not lower yourself for their comfort. You must not shrink to fit into the spaces you have outgrown. You must not soften your voice to make others feel secure in their own limitations. The eagle does not descend to explain its flight to the creatures of the earth. The river does not pause its course to justify why it flows. The sun does not dim its light because some find it too bright. And you? You do not need to explain why you are no longer the person you used to be. There is a story of a monk who spent years in solitude, meditating in the mountains. When he finally returned to the village, people bombarded him with questions. What did you learn? Why did you leave? Why did you come back? But the monk did not answer. He simply smiled, walking past them without a word. Some were frustrated, some were confused. But the ones who truly understood, they did not ask. They simply walked with him, knowing that the greatest truths need no explanation. You must move through life the same way. Let them question, let them assume, let them misunderstand. It is not your job to correct them. It is not your responsibility to make them comfortable with your growth. Your only task is to keep moving forward, to keep expanding, to keep becoming the version of yourself that no longer asks for permission to exist. But understand this, when you stop explaining, you will lose people. Some will fall away, some will resent you, some will try to pull you back into old patterns, hoping to make you doubt yourself. Do not engage, let them go. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with the quiet understanding that their chapter in your life has ended. Because the right ones, they will not ask you to explain. They will not demand that you prove yourself. They will not make you feel as if you must justify your own existence. They will simply recognize you. They will see you without words, without effort, without expectation. And those are the only ones who were ever meant to walk with you. So ask yourself, who are you still explaining yourself to? And why? What would happen if right now you decided that no explanation was necessary, that you were allowed to exist, to grow, to move forward without justifying it to anyone? The answer is simple. You would be free. And once you taste that freedom, once you step into the lightness of living without the weight of explanation, you will wonder why you ever sought approval in the first place. There is no need to explain, no need to convince, no need to wait. You are already enough. You always have been. And that is all the explanation the world will ever need. But here is the hardest part. When you stop explaining, you will lose people. Not because you have done something wrong, but because some were only ever comfortable with the version of you that asked for their approval. When you no longer need their validation, when you no longer shape yourself around their expectations, they will resist. They will push back. They will try to pull you into the old conversations, the old arguments, the old cycle of justification that kept you bound. And in that moment, you must make a choice. Do you step back into the past to ease their discomfort? Or do you walk forward into the unknown, knowing that not everyone is meant to come with you? The greatest minds, the strongest leaders, the most unshakable souls in history did not spend their energy explaining themselves to those who could not see beyond their own limitations. They did not pause their journey to convince the doubters, nor did they shrink themselves to be more digestible for the comfort of others. They simply were, and in their being, they forced the world to adjust to them, not the other way around. Think of the mountain that rises against the sky. It does not explain why it stands tall. It does not seek permission to exist. It does not lower itself to be more acceptable to those who fear its height. And yet it is undeniable. Those who cannot climb it will call it too steep. Those who are afraid of its presence will claim it blocks the view. But the mountain does not concern itself with these things. It simply is. And in its existence, it commands respect, not through argument, but through presence alone. This is the energy you must embody, not the energy of one who argues for their place, but the energy of one who knows they belong, the energy of one who does not waste breath convincing, but instead allows their actions to speak. Because the truth is, those who are meant to see you will see you without explanation. And those who are not, they never would have, no matter how many words you gave them. But to reach this place, you must be willing to let go. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the belief that validation will bring you peace. Let go of the idea that if you just explain enough, defend enough, prove yourself enough, the world will finally give you the approval you seek. It will not, because you were never meant to be contained within the expectations of others. You were meant to break them, to rise beyond them, to become so undeniable in your being that the only explanation necessary is the one written in your existence itself. So ask yourself now, what am I still explaining? What parts of yourself are you still defending? What steps have you delayed because you were waiting for the world to understand? And what would happen if in this moment you chose to walk forward anyway? If you chose to set down the weight of justification and simply be? Because the truth is, the moment you stop explaining yourself, the moment you stop asking for permission, the moment you move forward without waiting for approval, you become free. And that freedom, it is what the world fears most. Because a person who does not need validation cannot be controlled. A person who does not seek permission cannot be contained. And a person who has stopped explaining, that person is unstoppable. There is a certain peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself. It is a silence so deep that it feels like stepping out of a storm and into stillness. A stillness where you are no longer at war with yourself, no longer trying to justify your existence, no longer bending to meet the expectations of others. In that stillness, you realize something powerful. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. The world teaches you that acceptance is the key to belonging, that if you are kind enough, patient enough, agreeable enough, people will see you, respect you, understand you. But this is a lie. The truth is, no matter what you do, some will still misjudge you, some will still question you, Some will still reject you. And it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. There is an old Zen story about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbor said, "What bad luck?" But the farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned with a dozen wild horses, and the neighbor said, "What good fortune?" Again, the farmer replied, "Maybe." Later, his son tried to ride one of the wild horses and broke his leg. The neighbors pitied him. "What terrible luck!" But again, the farmer said, "Maybe." Soon after, soldiers came to the village, taking all able-bodied young men to war. But because the farmer's son was injured, he was left behind. "How lucky you are," the neighbors said. And again, the farmer only answered, "Maybe." The lesson is clear. Life is always moving, always changing, and other people's judgments are based on their limited perspective. What they call a mistake today